thanks everybody for coming out today. We appreciate it. We are FM BetterForms and we put on a Friday Live, which is kind of a FileMaker meetup. It's kind of half FileMaker, half BetterForms. We do encourage lots of participation and chiming in and things like that. We're trying not to make it too formal. It's more of a hangout. We started this Friday Live, actually. We were one of the first, I think, virtual ones because there was nothing going on when COVID started, and we've continued pretty consistently now. So we got quite a bit of a decent turnout. So we really appreciate our community for that. This month, we have a special guest, Ian Jempson. He's from the UK. And some of us who have traveled to some of the various European FileMaker meetup groups know him as a regular presenter. He's quite good. I always look forward to hearing some little tidbits that he's found in his experiences with FileMaker and AI. And I'm not sure if he's joined us yet, but hopefully, fingers crossed, everything is good, and he'll be on. Sorry, I'm not sharing my screen there. There we go. This month, we'll talk about a few things, our latest updates. We're going to talk about AI with Ian, and finally, we'll finish off with our normal swag draw and post hangout as well. Quick reminder for everybody, we do have a base code update. We have delayed it a little bit because we did find one bug. It's funny that we've announced this for 5 months, but just recently that we found an actual bug that stops us from pushing everything out, and it's just one compatibility issue. Once we get that resolved, we'll be pushing everybody's sites forward. Just for your own reference, what it's related to is if you're using apps that are built with our client portal template 2, that has a navigational highlight slug glitch where multiple slugs can be highlighted at the same time. So once we fix that in our base code, that's a compatibility thing, then we'll be able to push that out. I'm going to flip things over right away to Hassan, who's a product owner for FM BetterForms, and he takes care of sort of orchestrating all of the development and who's doing what and what features that we're currently working on and so on as well. He's got some news and some updates, and take it away.
Yeah, thanks, Charles. I'll take it over from here. Yeah, so there's been a lot of changes since the last deploy. The last deploy wasn't for at least a month. So there's a lot of things to look out for. I'll start with some of the notable things. One notable thing a lot of you will start noticing after our deployment today is the AI assistant is now going to be available in a lot more places throughout the app. It's not just going to be for the HTML editor. So that's something you guys should all be looking out for, and Charles will demonstrate the power of that. Next, in the servers tab, you can now see what servers are connected and not connected. This way you can remove some cruft data. Another thing to look out for is there's now improved documentation, notably on our error codes and getting started section, all thanks to Linshu. And this is something to look out for more and more as we're going to be focusing on updating this more regularly. Another thing, we now have improved UI for a new page editor. So let me just hop in here. So this new page editor here, if you guys noticed, the new app editor had changed in our last deploy. And in this deploy, we updated the new page editor. So let me just make a page over here. And there we go. Another thing, a key feature that a lot of people have been using, and there's been a lot of support needed for on general support, is a rollback feature, because that wasn't necessarily always working properly. So I'm going to demonstrate this here. So I'll just remove all this data. I'll put in an accordion just for testing purposes. And now I'm going to try rolling back this page. Let's go roll back. I got previous versions. I'll go to my first version here. And now if you notice, we got the rollback page successful alert and the page rollback instantly. Before there was an issue where you'd have to like leave the page, refresh, and do a bunch of stuff. But there's been much more increased usability of this rollback feature on all the pages it's accessible on. Another thing, some notable bug fixes are there's an issue with the first named action. I saw a lot of responses on general support on this too, where you couldn't edit the first named action. It wouldn't let you remove it or edit it. Now you can do that. That's working. Another big bug fix is the HTML editor. If you're adding some stuff in your data model here, this wouldn't save over if you close the modal. This is now saving. So if I go here, yep, we got it right here. Another major bug that I'm going to go over is calcs. So I noticed a lot of issues on this in general support as well. If you had a broken calc, your page would no longer be viewable. So I'm just going to demonstrate this real quickly. So if I preview my page right now, it's working just fine. If I add a calc in here, and we're going to have a broken calc on purpose. So right here, this is a broken calc. Before your page would go to an error state and not work and not let you do anything. But now you just simply get an alert and that field is broken. It no longer breaks your entire page. And now if I remove the calc, the page will go back to normal. Additionally, there's been a lot of notable changes to our actions editor, especially the global actions editor, as well as the component section. So feel free to try these things out over here as well. And lastly, all these changes will be available on our changelog over here. This will be under version 58, and we'll roll this out as we deploy. So in detail, there's been a lot of changes, so you can see all of them over here. All right, and is there any questions?
Yeah, I have a question. I didn't quite see what was in that message. What is it telling you to help you find which calc, if anything,
Oh,
is
yeah.
here? I've always
I'll
found
just
that to be the
demonstrate that
most
again, yeah.
frustrating thing.
Here. This should have been a broken calc, right? Yep. Something here. Calc. Preview. Right here, you see it says where it was, call MD12 clear fix.
Okay,
So
yeah,
you,
cool. That's awesome.
yeah, so now you kind of know where it is as well. All right. If there's no more questions, I'll hand it back off to Charles.
Awesome. Thank you. About it's funny, we all write software, so I can talk pretty candidly. It's amazing how many bugs show up in an app, and the more users you have, the more bugs you have. And I think disproportionately when I used to do pure FileMaker development, we would get bugs, of course, but it seems like there wasn't as many, and I think it's mainly because the users were on the payroll and they just accept it. And but when it's optional to use something, then it's you see every little tiny thing coming out. So Hassan, about how many bugs roughly would you say?
I believe it was close to 45.
Yeah, so these are all, big things, little things, and it's amazing. And our rate of tackling this stuff is significantly increased now. So this is great. Alrighty. I want to demonstrate or talk about some new things that we have been working on. These are going to be incorporated partially into the next release and then slowly through interim releases over the next month or so, behind various feature flags. Our biggest thing that we've been really working on for the past month, really been grinding on, is our AI assistant. To not sound too much like an Apple ad, we know everybody uses the AI assistant, or a lot of people who do use it really, really heavily because we can see the logs. And we also see some of the stuff that everybody's building. So we know it has some really decent benefit. We talked about, I guess, I talked in Montreal, I think it was, or actually, sorry, it was in Berlin, about practical real world use cases of AI. And I think the AI assistant was a good start for us, but it was only available in 3 places within the app. It was available in the HTML modal, the JavaScript modal, the data model, the development data model. So that's it, those 3 places. What we've done is we've added support for it to have it in, we've added infrastructure so that we can add it to 100% of the app. And we are going to be releasing about 13 places to start off with. So I'm going to give you a quick demo of that today. This is not going to be exactly precisely as we release it, because if anybody's been working with AI, you know it's a different world. It's a temperamental sort of thing, but I think it's still a pretty good ad. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump into my app here. We've moved the AI assistant to make it more global. So it's sitting up here. We want you to be able to jump in and out of the in and out of using it seamlessly. So it has context awareness. It knows where you are within the app and what you can do on that given page. So I'm going to use my keystroke to open it up. One of the things we did is we made it dockable on the side, and then you can also, for if you're working on a smaller screen, there's a big thumbs up. You can move it around as well. Alrighty. So from this position, some of the things we can do is we've been amassing our forum, which is a curated mirror of our Slack channel. So when we see something interesting, we have an automation in Slack. You click a button. This is something that Andrew built. I think it was Andrew who built it last year, or maybe a year and a half ago. And you click a button and it pushes the conversation into Slack, and it says, continue there, and posts a link. And we did that because we knew that we want to gather all of this information, all this really good support stuff. And then we also have our documentation. So now the AI assistant has access to all of that documentation. So tell me about the FM BetterForms helper file. So let's start with something like this. And what it's going to do, you all see sometimes it'll take a little bit longer of a delay. But it's going to tell me about the helper file. It's also going to include references to the documentation here as well. So here's a link right away to our docs, which is going to be quite handy. As we continue to curate our docs, these links and the links to the forum posts will become more accurate. They're pretty good now, but we just got the links to the documents functioning. And in this case, we're just doing some debugging here. You can see that it came from 5 different sources of information on the back. All right, let's try something else here. How do I add OAuth to my application in FM BetterForms? And I'm going to OAuth. Yeah. I kind of get lazy with typing, so I've been using, oops. Oh, well, we'll see what comes back. Not quite the right prompt, but so here we go. So this is kind of interesting. So this is something that typically you would ping us on support for, right? So let's let it stream out here. And incidentally, this API that we're using here for streaming is available to you as an end user as well. So we'll have full documentation on that. We have a preliminary doc already for our first version. This one here is using OpenAI with an assistance endpoint, but the streaming endpoint is something that you can add right away. So if you want to build a streaming AI assistant right in FileMaker and using a web viewer with a BetterForms app in there, you can stream that data in and then have the web viewer talk directly through FM FileMaker script call and build this streaming widget right inside your FileMaker app. So it doesn't even have to be a BetterForms app, but as long as it's a web viewer, right? We already have all that apparatus built, and it's pretty much free to use for all of our users. So you can see here it's added or asked us that we need a client key, a secret key, a subdomain. It's gone through, it's given us some links and some instructional steps here, and add a button or link to the main page, and even told me how to add that link in there. So I think that's going to be really, really useful. So this is something that you can use from virtually anywhere in the app. This particular page, it knows that it's on this page and it can't really do too much. So let's pick something more interesting here. So here's my app model for my page here, and I want to add maybe some support for multiple languages. So how can we do that? Add support for English and French. So right away, it is adding an I-18N dictionary with those 2 letters. one of the things with our old assistant is it had reference to the, let's say you're using an HTML, it was only available in 3 spots. So when you're using it in HTML, it had reference to the data model. It didn't actually know the difference between the development and the default data models. So they were kind of put together. Now the assistant basically knows has access to your entire app. So it knows about your site and your app level. It knows about your DOM header insertions. It knows about your page if you're on a given page and so on. So it has a lot more context that we can pass in, and we can do that fortunately because the context windows for some of the LLM providers has significantly increased over the past year. So this is an example of something here. I'm going to jump to a couple other places here as well. We'll start a new conversation. So here's our DOM header insertions, and currently I have some stuff in my demo app, some random items here, and I don't think there's anything that's, yeah. So from here, let's say somebody was just asking, I think it was Bob who was just asking, about Shoelace. Shoelace is a new library that's, or it's an existing library. And I'll mention a little bit about that because there's some news there as well. And let's add that in. Oops, let's see, sorry. I want to add Shoelace web components into my app. So what it's doing is it's already grabbed the URL for Shoelace, and it mostly knows how to install that as a CDN, and it's added that in. I think that's going to be a massive, oops, I'm still dictating here, sorry. I think that's going to be a massive time saver and problem solver for everybody. It also understands the difference between load now and load later, so it's got reference to that. And you can ask it related questions about those kinds of things, and it can make some educational decisions on what stuff should go on what side. You can even ask it to say, hey, check these version libraries. Are they the latest? Now, that's not super accurate because the LLMs have cutoff dates. But if you're using something that's 5 years old compared to now, it's probably going to be, it can help point that out. And it can throw you some links to those relative documentations as well. Any questions about any of this stuff so far? Thumbs up, thumbs down? You can be honest. My feelings are
I have a
pretty.
question. So when you're working, do you need to be like inside the DOM header section, for instance, when you're adding a DOM header, or does it know to like navigate there if you were on the app modelers?
That's a great question. So if I was over here on this page, how would I add a CDN library into my app? Would you like me to navigate to the DOM insertions tab and check out this questions? So this is something that's actually kind of new that this is literally only a week old, this stuff here. Because we got some really kind of cool benefits because BetterForms is a dynamically rendered app. So we can tell the LLM to dynamically render stuff, and we can have it add stuff like this in here. It's not going to navigate to the app, so I'm not going to click on the button because it's disabled at the moment. But by giving it a bit of agency, it gives us a lot of ability there. So our long-term goals, or midterm goals, I should say, short-term is we have the stuff I'm going to demonstrate today. And that'll be out over the next few weeks. Midterm goals is to have a lot more agency. So that means we can say to the AI assistant, what page should I use to do something? And it'll be able to reference those pages. It'll be able to go back to FileMaker and say, I can do a search in FileMaker and find those existing pages and say, hey, these are the pages over here. We can also say, give search results from FileMaker. So using like an augmented retrieval, I ping FileMaker, come back in here and show search results in here. So that's going to be really, really powerful as well. And the biggest thing is, and very, very, very early tests show this is reasonably promising. is we'll be able to say, interview me. I'm kind of dumbing it down a little bit, but interview me and ask me a bunch of questions about the app that I want to build, then build the app. And I'll say, okay, tell me what the uses of the app is, and it'll go through a wizard type process, dynamically rendering the AI just like this, or UI, I should say. And then from there, it'll have enough agency that it'll actually can generate the app based on, we have enough existing data that we can reference some really good design and best practices, and it can wire up, give you an entire wireframed app at that point. So really looking forward to where we're going to go with this. And this is why sort of the topic of this week is that we're all in on AI in terms of integration into the app itself. All right, I'll show you a couple other quick things really quick here too. And alrighty. So I have a page, actually, let me just dump this out of here. And so I have more or less an empty page, and I want to add some schema to the page. So this is another area that we've never had access to before. We've never been able to control schema, and this is very, very early still. So it's making a few mistakes, but we'll get it dialed in and be able to do some things. So create a sign up form for a new app. My app's name is Yardi, and it will have people sign up into the application. I'll need their email, phone number, and address, and a field for radius. And then I will tell them about all the yard sales in the area. Also, at the bottom, add a standard disclaimer because I am grabbing some of that information. Oh, and add a header at the top with white text Yardi on top of that image. The image in the header should be like of a yard sale. So this is the kind of stuff where we're heading to. And hopefully it doesn't. And this is the kind of challenges that we have with working with temperamental LLMs. And it streamed our information to the wrong spot here. So this is some of the stuff that we're just kind of getting dialed in here. I literally just did this before our call, and everything went reasonably well. But that's just the nature of this style of coding these days. But anyhow, at any rate, you have to trust me on this one, and I'll gladly demonstrate some other time. But it does stream it all in, and pops a header in, and now suddenly you'll have a finished product. Let's actually just try it again here. Let me just grab this. Let me just give it one more attempt. Yeah. All right. There's something we've might have tweaked here that might be off a little bit. Because yeah, okay. So I'm gonna scratch that one for just a second. A couple other areas here we have not incorporated into the action scripts yet. That's going to be a different beast, if you will, because it's a little bit more complex. Although BetterForms does understand, the AI assistant does and understand action scripts. Like if I was here and I said, what type of actions do I have and what are actions? It does understand that concept. Actions and BetterForms are proprietary, blah, blah, blah. And here's the actions I have on my actual page, which is interesting because that means you can say, hey, connect this up to the action, and the button will actually wire up to your actions that you have. I have these are global actions in this case. So it can see the global actions and my local actions, and some more information and some links to the documentation as well. So that's pretty big. The data models here. This is kind of neat as well. Let me just get rid of, actually, let's do this. I'm going to get rid of some of my data in here, and I'll get rid of some data here. There. create 5 contacts that I can use for development. These contacts should have an email, first name and last name. So what's kind of neat here, if all goes according to plan. Incidentally, we use OpenAI as the LLM provider. Literally once or twice a day, we get a status update that there's problems. This morning, it was offline for more or less 2 hours. It was really slow, and it might be that way again. I haven't pulled the trigger on switching that because I think they're going to overcome those issues, and I think when that happens, we'll still end up with a pretty decent model. They're still one of the better ones. We've experimented with different models, and I think Ian messaged, I'm not sure if he came in today, he came yet, but he did message me that he's on his way. And maybe he can add some light to this, but we do find that there's,
yeah.
hey, how you doing?
Good.
Welcome.
Sorry, I didn't
All
want
good.
to, when I joined, I didn't want to interrupt you. So
All
you were
good. All good.
showing
Yeah.
really
So
cool.
what I was just saying is we are going to second or multi-source our API so that you can use other models as well. We will pick the second model based on our own personal needs because we do have to write custom code for that, but at least it'll give you 2 choices of what you want to use in your apps, any apps that you build with AI incorporated into them as well. So a few other things. I think those are the main areas that I have I wanted to go through. We are also adding, let's exit there. We are also adding the assistant into, this is not built in yet, but it will be available shortly, is into CSS. So it'll be able to generate your CSS and also into your navigational slugs into the menu schema. One of the big things, and unfortunately I couldn't demonstrate this today, but is when you're doing something in page schema, you can actually do conditional calculations. So you can say something like hide this middle name field if that field is empty, and it'll actually do the underscore calculations and calculate those all out too, and that works quite well. So I hope you like that's where we're going with AI. Just as a quick recap, started off with 3 areas. We're about 14 areas right now over the next 2 weeks. And then over the next quarter, we'll pretty much have the entire app because once we have the framework in place, it's pretty easy to add references to various areas. We want to incorporate agency. So the AI will be able to navigate you around into the app and do your tasks more. So they'll drive your app. But there are going to be some areas where we want to directly just change something like, hey, I went over here. You didn't see it, but we went and changed it for you. And we came back, like, for example, nav slugs or actions. If I'm working on a page and I can have the AI write all of those actions out for me of what I need to do. All right. Any questions about any of that? Do you think it's something that would be useful? Good question.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
that's
Because I want to know that, like, these bags under my eyes, because I've been staying up all night for the past 3 weeks, month. I want to know that they're not a waste of time. So anyhow, we're pretty excited about that. So I hope you get some feedback. There's one quick thing I just want to mention really quick too. This is an important one. Let me just write some stuff in here quick. And all right. This guy right here is going to be a real important one. If you click that, we're going to be logging that information. So please use it properly and looking at your prompt and what data you fed the AI so that we can fix that, whatever that issue was. And hopefully we'll be able to tell just from that we won't need a description of what the issue was. So that's going to be a big thing as well. All right, awesome. I'd like to introduce you, Ian Jempson. So, Ian, thanks for joining us. You're located, are you right in London or?
Yeah, right in London. We're about a 15-minute walk south of the river, sort of just between Waterloo and London Bridge, if you know London. So we're can't
I know
really
the
get much
song,
more central than that.
right? So, originally, Ian was actually from close to our area here, right? You're originally from Ottawa or Ottawa
Yeah,
Valley,
so yeah,
and
Ottawa Valley, so about a 5-hour drive from where you are.
right, and no turning back, or
Uh Not at the moment, but we'll see. Anna, my partner, she's from Vancouver, so she may want to head back there someday. So never say never.
yeah, that's okay. It's all good. All
Yeah,
good. Well, thanks for joining us, and I'm gonna stop my screen share, and I'm hoping we can talk about some AI and some cool stuff.
sure. There's just a couple of things, comments from what you showed there, and when you were talking about the curated nature of your knowledge base, that's really good and really important because um,
Mm.
what it means is that when people ask questions, they know they're going to be getting good answers. If you took, for example, the FileMaker forums,
Yeah,
much of the stuff that is in there is questions that are poorly phrased. Sometimes answers meander around a bit before we end up at a solution, and a lot of stuff is out of date. So the fact that you're curating that means it's going to be good quality stuff, and
it's
actually really helpful.
it's only a first level, but
Yeah,
we were thinking of using AI to look at each one of the forum posts and say, hey, did the answer get solved? Look for these, like sometimes there's a solve flag on there, and it's
yeah.
usually like the last post. And maybe rephrasing that. Is that something that would be like kind of a strategy to use AI to run through all of that and regenerate that data as reference?
Yeah, that
Or
could
is it
be. I mean,
redundant?
the
Like,
the only thing is that if something's marked as solved, if people give like 3 or 4 different divergent methods to solving it,
hmm,
unless it actually clearly states which one was used to solve it, that could be difficult. Um, but then you've also got, if we take the FileMaker forum as an example, there are certain people that if they answer the question, you can pretty much take it as being almost an authoritative, saying
right.
that
So
if this
you could
person's
give
given an
weight.
answer,
So if you have a bunch of data, we have all like everybody here is FileMaker data. We could give weight to some data over other data, perhaps, or even just filter it out and say, no, we're only going to use this set of data.
yeah. And I think one of the other big sort of issues you get is when things when things go out of date or when answers go out of date. Um, and if you think about with FileMaker how much it's changed over the last 20 years, there are still answers in their knowledge base that are from 20 years ago, and there are often much better, more modern ways of doing things.
How come you
So
think FileMaker hasn't done that? Like, I mean, using, say, FM forums, for example, with Stephen Dolinsky's site, or even the community is huge now. So I've taken that or maybe somebody even as a project, maybe.
yes, Chris Hippolyte's got a project that he's been talking about um, to do that, and I think the guys at FileMaker said that they would
Hmm.
contribute data to that. So there may be something like that on the way.
So is the expense in the curation, you think, then in that case? Because like for FileMaker, I think if you just put our community is a little bit more on average, I think is higher than like more educated, say, than the average FileMaker user across the board because it's huge
Yeah,
spectrum there. I can't imagine having like an answer that's even slightly wrong in their AI because not everybody is going to know that it's not quality. Maybe.
yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. That makes sense. Looks like Heidi's got a question. or at least her hand is raised.
Yeah, sometimes the as soon as you go like that, it kind of some of the
Can you hear
auto gesture recognition. Go ahead, Heidi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. So the project is called Claristotle, and Claris is involved, and anyone's invited to the meetings on it. I went to one on July 12th, and Ronnie Rios came, and they're going to provide all of the help to start. The advice of many of us was to start small instead of just get all the info. And there's a Discord link if anybody wants to join. I will find that link and post it in the chat. So there is a project to do this.
What would we contribute on, do you think, other than just comments and turning it into a pricing conversation?
What would you contribute?
Yeah.
Well, I guess any insights or any, if you want to lend some thoughts on direction. The other thing is, one of the things I thought should happen is, once they start putting in more documents or forums and stuff like that, that there should be some kind of vetting. And yeah, you can do some evaluation once it's already in there and, score it and all of that, but it just might be more efficient to vet things versus have everybody just dump collateral that will be.
Yeah. So again, back to the curation, right? The quality of your data.
Yeah. And sorry, I missed the first part of the conversation, but yeah. So I will find the Discord link and post that in case anyone is interested in just seeing the chatter and the forum. They usually summarize the meetings. I wasn't at the first meeting, if you want to see what's happening there.
Yeah, I was at the first meeting, but I think I missed the subsequent ones.
Okay.
So Ian,
Yeah.
feel free to just lead away, but what is
Okay.
semantic search?
Oh, what is semantic search?
Yeah.
Okay, essentially what it allows us to do is within FileMaker to search on the underlying meaning of a chunk of text, as opposed to keyword search, which allows us to do kind of the traditional, this and that, but not something else kind of search, where it's all looking at precise keywords. They've named the feature semantic search, and that's what it's doing, but it can be useful for things other than just purely searching for text. So one of the samples that I've done is to take I've been using it to classify hotel reviews. And if I'm able to share, am I able to share my screen?
Yeah. Please do.
Okay. And I think I want this desktop. Okay. So what I've done here is I basically found a Kaggle data set of hotel reviews. It's like about 20,000 hotel reviews. And it's got a rating from 5 being good to 1 being poor. And I basically imported that. We can do semantic search on it. So and this is basically using the built-in FileMaker features. So you can see it found from that, it found hotels with a rating of 5, like good hotels. And likewise, if I said something like this, it will find a bunch of bad reviews as well. But for something like this, there's other uses. So what we could do is, for example, if we say we want to import some, we wanted to import some reviews. I went to ChatGPT and asked it to write some hotel reviews. And if I just import those, you can see there's only 10 there. And this is, of course, where it breaks. But you can see what it's done is it's gone and it's classified the reviews. So that was 10. But if somebody was, say, for example, importing a lot of reviews, say hundreds a day, what this could do is something like this could flag up the ones that are in need of attention.
Right. So if you're managing customer communications, for example, I know somebody who has a point of sale software that they deal with a lot of their clients are shops, and they deal with the public. They could be field or triaging all of these feedback and look for the real irate people or something like that.
Yeah, exactly. And it can do that. And the way I did that actually is quite simple. But what it does is for each of the reviews it imported, it generates an embedding, and then it does an embedding search. And it looks to the existing data set that we've got and finds the ones that are closest, and then takes the average of the reviews of those ones. And that's how it's kind of categorizing. So it's using the existing data in the system to classify the new ones coming in. And there's an advantage to this kind of approach as well, because if you use an LLM to do that kind of thing, you've got the potential for hallucination. Whereas in this case, because what it's doing is it's looking to your existing data, finding the ones that are closest. So it's not going to hallucinate. It's just going to give it a score that is the average of the things that it finds to be the closest. So I just wanted to sort of show that to say that that semantic search can do more than just us typing in a question and it giving us an answer.
A quick poll here on how many people have real world use cases for semantic search within their FileMaker app.
Yeah. And so in this case, what I'm not using OpenAI, I'm using an embedding model that I'm running on my own API. So I've got that running locally. And so these things can run with either OpenAI or other custom providers.
Maybe if we could touch on that a little bit, and if you want to just explain a little bit to what is an embedding is as compared to an index field, if you will, or in traditional FileMaker.
Okay, so I'll just move that. I'll just say yes, submit it, get it out of the way. Okay. So if I go into manage database here, so we've got the reviews, and what I've done is I've created a field for the embedding, and in this case it's a container field. But what the embedding actually is it takes the text and it converts it to a vector. So essentially what we've got a vector of numbers between 0 and 1, or rather between -1 and 1. And it's in around about, I think the one I've used is about 1024 dimensions. So it gives us a string of numbers that's 1024 in length. And we can actually look at that by saying, if we just find our embedding model, sorry, our embedding, and we've got if we say get embedding as text, and our embedding is sorry, just let me go to the right place, right context. Okay. That embedding as text, and we've got our embedding, and it gives us a vector that looks basically a large string of numbers like that. So there's around about 1,000 of them. And then it uses something called cosine similarity to find how similar this vector is to some other vector. and it can order that. The ones that are closest are the most similar. And what we're doing here is we're storing it in a container field, primarily because that's more efficient for FileMaker. It's faster if we store it, performs better if we store it in a container field compared to if we stored it in a text field. And one of the questions we've had previously is, does it need to be an internally stored container, or can it be stored externally? And the testing I've done seems to suggest that if we store it externally, it's about 15% slower than if we store it internally.
So it's interesting. So externally, as in a container?
That's correct.
Right.
So yeah. So
Right.
in managed database, if we look at the container and our storage options here, so you can see this particular one, I've done it externally, and so that's storing it on my server in that folder. The reason for this is that those embeddings are quite large. And
I'm surprised it's not even, it's slower than that. Like, I'm surprised because FileMaker's not building an index of the embeddings, because the embeddings effectively are kind of like an index to search upon.
Exactly.
So what it's got to
bear in mind, I'm searching also on a set of 20,000, so it's not a huge number. When I did my performance testing before, it looked like FileMaker was pretty good up to around about, say, 70,000 records or so. But if you're below 70,000 records, your search was going to be within a second or two.
I think it's still pretty reasonable. I mean, you could probably pre-filter or pre-find a lot of your data, like just reduce it down to a region, or like for hotels. I'm not going to search every,
Absolutely.
right?
No, that's absolutely what you want to do. So
Hybrid.
One of the other examples I've got, and this is basically a very early prototype of my migration of this product from the web to running in FileMaker. And what I'm doing here is basically we've got meeting recordings. And with the meeting recordings, basically we've got the transcripts, summaries, the speakers, and so forth. But if I go to themes, that if I searched, basically these are some of the themes that I came up with from my I imported my dissertation interviews as well to look at what themes I had there. So if you looked at themes on deployment, what that's done is that's found the parts of transcripts that are related to that particular theme.
So how would you go about doing something like that? So you have this big body of text in FileMaker.
Yeah. So what I've done here actually is that I am actually pre-searching. So I'm searching before I do the semantic search. I do an index search to exclude certain speakers to make sure that it's in the right category of meetings that I'm searching. So I'm going from, say, let's call it 50,000 items. I'm bringing that down to about 5 or 10,000 items, and then I do the semantic search. So combining the two is quite powerful.
Right. So kind of like a hybrid search. Would you ever, couple questions. Just going back to the embeddings and the size of your embedding, I would imagine that most of the topic or the content that the average FileMaker database is pretty usually use case specific. Does it matter too much about the size of the embedding? Like, do I really need more points?
If we look at this, get container. Is it all? Yeah.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
Okay. So what you can see there is that showing the file size of being just over 3K for that container. So we've got 20,000 records, sort of 3K per record. You know, it can mount up if you've got a very large data set.
So how would the average user, how would the average FileMaker person figure out, like, what should I just trial and error, or should I just say I'll just take the average one, the 1024, the 1500
Do you mean in terms
size?
of which model to use?
Yeah, yeah. A big one, little one.
That kind of opens a real can of worms, because choosing which model you're going to use can be quite difficult. In most cases, most people are probably going to get started off using OpenAI because it's really, really simple to do.
Mm-hmm.
It's the simplest approach. And so they're going to use either the large model or the small model. And those will be the most common that we see. So the small model, the thing is, those are both state-of-the-art models that are going to give really, really good general results across the board. You might find that if someone's got a specific need, a really, really narrow use case, that maybe like a custom model might give better. So if someone was working in finance,
Right.
a model from Bloomberg that is finance focused is going to give better results than the OpenAI general
Is
model.
it fair to say then we shouldn't have to worry about it then? Like, so I'm building a database for tracking customers or something, you know,
I'm
CRM.
inclined to say you're not going to have to worry about it. That I'm inclined to
Right.
say
Yeah. Okay.
that OpenAI, both the OpenAI models are going to be pretty good, and they're going to give you pretty good results.
Big difference in size, storage size. So I got 100,000 records.
Oh,
I use the big one and the little one.
yes, yes. Sorry, I've got some statistics on this,
Sure.
if I can find them. Here's my .fmp. I think my .fmp presentation had some stats on that.
I'll create another pool.
And oh, what do you know? We're actually right on the exact. That was the last time I had this open, somebody was discussing the same thing. So the OpenAI text embedding large model, the thing to note is that the embedding is going to take up the same amount of space, no matter how long the text input is. So in this case, I had a text input that was only 65 characters long, but the embedding came out as, 39K for the large model, and roughly half that, about 19 for the small model. So for 100,000 records, you're looking at, if you store it in containers, it takes up less space. But so for the large model, you're looking at 2 and a bit gigabytes for 100,000 records.
Is the less basic containers being stored as binary? So we're getting more.
Yes, it is. Yeah, it's
bit-based
also faster.
usage.
It's also faster, and also avoids the risk of someone accidentally indexing that, because you don't want to be generating an index on large numbers of numbers like that, which will. I should actually test that just to see what it does to the database size. I imagine it's going to bloat it enormously.
Yeah, well, it doesn't take much to do that usually. So
yeah, so yeah, so either of those two models is going to be good enough for almost all purposes. The small model is probably going to be good enough.
Launch another poll to see how many people have used.
Just move that to another window.
Try to get an idea.
Yeah.
How many people have used?
Yeah, and then the one of the questions this raises is, about backups in FileMaker. That you've now got a big chunk of data to back up. So what you can do is, I mean, actually put that into a separate file and maybe have that other file on a different backup strategy to because it's the kind of thing you can regenerate as well. And it's not expensive to generate. Think, yeah, so I did another example of like with 42 million tokens, like for the text embedding small, like less than $1. So the costs are quite low.
Time for to make the calls. I know you can do a bunch of parallel calls with the new features. And it probably doesn't really matter too much, you know, you start it and, you know, if it takes a half an hour or something like that for a massive data set.
That's the kind of length of time you're looking at, actually. I did a bunch of testing on the embedding performance, and yeah, you can improve the performance if you're doing a large quantity by playing around with the parameters that you're sending. But to be honest, it's the kind of thing that you don't need to do often. You're probably going to do it in the background. And that's also the one thing is that if you're running on a Windows server, some of the embedding functions, most Windows servers, or I can't think of any Windows servers that are going to have an NVIDIA GPU because they're just too expensive to have on something like a FileMaker server. So, so you might get slower performance in that case. And if you've got hosted files, I'm not quite sure how that's going to work out. The on the search side, not the embedding generation, but it's again that probably depends on the number of records. So,
does anybody have any questions? Does everybody fully understand what an embedding actually is? So a lot of crickets out there today. Like we're camping.
Sorry, I put everyone to sleep. I sometimes kind of go on when I go onto my hobby horses.
So let's look at some real world use cases. Okay, so we got things like reviews, comments. Those are all kind of text type fields. But I think the majority of the databases that I've ever used in FileMaker, like CRM related, invoice related, business operations kind of stuff, they don't usually have that much stuff in there. So as far as the semantic search is, is there any other ways, any other cool hacks that I could take some of my address fields or something like that and smith them into something that I can get some other value out of, if that makes any sense?
I've discussed that with a couple of people, and that's an example that a lot of people seem to come up with. My only concern there is the size of the embeddings, that you're generating, like you're using a lot of space to try to make it, to kind of fix the problem of people typing in a city name slightly wrong. So I'm not sure if that's the most.
So if you did concatenate like street, city, zip, and all that stuff in their postal code country, what kind of does that search yield anything better?
I've not actually tried that, to be honest.
Yeah, it seems like something I wouldn't bother to try, but I'm just wondering if there is even the slightest gain. I remember years ago, this is going back a very long time. There was a developer who created a Soundex. I think it was called Soundex. It's a mechanism for converting similarity
Yeah,
in
it's one.
sounds.
Yes.
And that you could do a search on that. So it would take a name like Jones, and there'd be a G and a N and Z kind of sound, and then put those together in a few things, and you could search on those kinds of terms and kind of get a near sounding name.
Yeah,
You know,
I used that actually years and years ago. I remember doing that just to
I
try
still
to.
have I still have a database that uses it. So, but yeah, so I'm just wondering, like, because that is a kind of thing that I see often with FileMaker develop, or not FileMaker develop, FileMaker users, where they go to
Yeah.
do a search and they don't realize they can just put a first couple letters. So they'll type in the entire name, and they got one little bit off somewhere in mid name, PH instead of an F or something, and their search doesn't yield anything. I'm wondering if there's any, without incurring a ton of bloat per field, at least anyway, maybe there's a way that we could hack this into solving that issue, because that would apply to every FileMaker database.
We have something somewhat similar. We were just talking about today, where like we're trying to validate if the address on the quote is the same as the address on the order. And you get that where someone typed in AVE, or like you said, just barely mistyped a street name or something, where it's pretty much the same. But in a regular search, obviously, it's not the same at all. Or, you know, even just a period after the AVE for Avenue could throw it off in a regular search.
Do you do anything for that? Like, do you solve it in any way, or just?
We ended up taking off validations, and I mean, it's probably going to be okay, but like it could be, I don't know. Yeah, I mean, it's one of those weird things. It's like it's not a problem until it is. And for the most part, it's not a problem right now, but
It just seems that, like a universal search, the concept of universal search is really nice in apps. And there's I think is it FM search results, Matt Navarre's widget that you can do that with. And that kind of thing, that Google-like search, seems to be something that AI would sort of be able to handle well, at least in a bunch of different data
Supposedly
sources.
he's working on it with Chris to be showing it soon at his new searching mechanism using AI. It was in their last live stream.
Yeah, I think that would be interesting. We want to add universal search. And for us, it's going to be pretty logical, because the stuff that you look for is like, where do I reference this model key, or where do I use this variable? So they're pretty much text searches. I don't know how we could use semantic search in our product itself for our use case. It's not like I'm saying, sorry, go ahead.
If you take the example of addresses, I mean, to be honest, what you could do, one approach would be you could hand off an address to an LLM and basically say, kind of normalize this address or put it in, perhaps.
Oh, that's interesting.
An approach like that might work.
So you're basically using an LLM, not so much the semantic search, but you're using an LLM to pick out the things. And you could probably even write a little bit of a pseudo prompt conversion script to take almost any randomized input and figure it out.
Yeah.
And then put it in a format that's searchable.
Yeah, possibly.
Like it doesn't have to be human readable, the format. That could be
the reason I thought of that is that I've seen two demos in the last week where what people have done is they're not doing semantic search, but they're using an LLM to basically extract the search words out of text and then perform a keyword search, basically handing off the search string, basically finding out what is it that the person wants to search on, and then performing keyword search on that. But they're using different databases that can return a closeness metric.
So I think you definitely do that. I mean, you could take, let's say, even of all the fields in a record, let's say first name, last name, all the stuff you typically search by postal code, and all the address bits. Send that to an LLM with a prompt that basically says, I want you to generate a index field of keywords out of this, and also get commonly misspelled typed words in there and include that in the index as well. Then use that as an index search field key, and then do the search on that. So it basically smartly generates an index for that particular record. That would be interesting to try.
Yeah. But you could also then, if the query was structured correctly, you could have it correct misspellings of, say, if somebody typed in the word avenue, misspelling it like AVENOO, you could presumably have it correct that into a normalized what you expect to search on.
Yeah, that's a great idea. And you could also have it go off, take the whole record. So it looks at the record and it can. So here's the thing we never talk about too much is validation. LLM does not a bad job at validating things. Hey, does this have this information in it? Does this cover all these criteria of it? And have it come back and have a little prompt, a little chat window, if you will, next to your record that says, it looks like this information might be wrong. Can you double check it? And it just says, yeah, no, it's correct. So it's almost like a Clippy, but the Clippy would validate your information based on some other things. Oh, that's interesting.
Yeah, that.
And with that though, like if you had a city and state that didn't match the zip, I don't know, would it check on that kind of stuff too? And then if it did that, you could look at the install address and say, okay, well, the ship to address and the install address are going to be close to each other. So it's probably the right zip in the wrong city, or the wrong, I don't know. I don't know how far it can go.
Well, it's an easy test.
Yeah, you could. I think, Charles, at some point we had a little bit of a discussion about tooling and sort of running scripts via the LLM. So that kind of thing certainly would be possible, that the LLM could know what it needs, or rather it could know how to do a lookup into a database to find, does the zip code match the state as part of the process.
There's also no shortage of APIs specifically for that job, by the way.
Yeah, but the thing is, here's the thing. Once you have the apparatus, it can do almost every job. Like, I get that you can go and incorporate an API to look up postal code, right? But if you can solve it with just building the framework, then it's literally another prompt record in your database and grabbing the right bits of data. And now you have a whole new pseudo integration or pseudo functionality. Like, it really scales exponentially in terms of what you can get out of it.
Yeah.
An example of that is calling functions. I've talked about it a little bit about before, but I don't know if anybody's ever experimented too much with this. But you can have an LLM come back and you can define a function, and the definition of a function is very vague, sort of. It's all text, and you say, look up invoice or retrieve invoice or something like that for the function name, and you have a brief description. This function will return an invoice when passed either a date or a date range, format the date range like this, or a invoice number or a product ID or something like that. And these are the arguments that it takes. It takes a date, it takes an invoice number, it takes a date start, a date end, an invoice number, or a product ID. And then when the LLM deems that it might need to look something up based on your query, and it makes a subjective decision there, it will return, it doesn't call a function in your database, but it returns a command that says a function call. And then you have to parse that command out, and then you just perform the script. You pass those parameters into your find, return the data back to the LLM. So now you've given it this really powerful ability to retrieve data based on a prompt. you make that flexible enough, and it can return from any tables that you deem that you give it. You can say, okay, this is how, these are the tables, these are the fields, and this is how you create a singular interface. Now your LLM suddenly, by one simple script, it can access virtually any table that you want, you give it permission to, and assimilate that data into the response. And that's crazy powerful, right? That's really, really, really cool, because the text that it gets back is formatted, and you throw that into a web viewer as markdown, and now you get this beautiful display every time in terms of results. Very similar to our scrolling streaming chat. And that's super easy to do. Have you played around much with the like, where can we play around with models? And let's chat on those a bit.
Play around with models.
I mean Hollywood, but I mean, you know.
Yeah. Okay.
Like, are there, like, I know there's model places like Hugging Face and whatnot. Does the average person, like, you know, I'm building a CRM, or my customers doing at some kind of shop management, do I need to really and truly figure out, well, there's this model, and this is the 8 billion, and this is a 17 billion model, and everything like that? Do I really need to care about that, or yeah, I kind of actually do, and this is the reason?
I think to get started, no. I think to get started, I would go with OpenAI to start, just until you sort of get a sense of how things work. And that, to be honest, that's what a lot of people I've chatted with who are building software as a service, they're saying that what they're doing is they're prototyping using OpenAI because it's so simple to prototype with. Then once they've proved the concept, that's when they go and they look at changing away from OpenAI.
Right. So when maybe cost becomes a factor, possibly.
Yeah. If you're building something at scale and you need a lot of interaction with LLM, the biggest issue is getting your hands on an NVIDIA GPU. That's if you're doing it at scale, like with a lot of
So that's like an on-site or on your machine kind of thing, you're
yeah,
saying?
or even in the cloud.
Yeah, I mean, like, but like your machine versus using an API, like using OpenAI.
Yes.
Yeah, gotcha.
So in my case, I've basically been using models from Hugging Face and doing some fine tuning of those, but that's because I'd already written a set of APIs before I started messing around with FileMaker, and I was kind of carried on down that road because the stuff that I build actually I expect is going to need to run in the cloud. So
right, at a greater scale. So
fingers crossed. Yes.
Here's what we found. Because we've been, you know, using AI for, I guess, integrated into the product since last November, roughly, publicly. And we started off with GPT-4. We went with OpenAI. Did look at some of the other models and things like that, but it's just accessible. And sometimes that's, you know, get it quick and dirty is good. So we went with GPT-4. Actually, it was 3.5 a year prior to that, and it wasn't good enough, 3.5. But 4 came along, and it was totally good enough. Let me see if I have 4 pricing. I don't even know if 4 pricing is listed on here. I don't see. I see 4.0, but not 4.
They try to encourage people to keep up and move along to.
Yeah, I guess it's, you know, it's better for them, right? Obviously, there's better profit margins or something. Otherwise, there's, you know,
well, actually, surprisingly enough, if you stick with one of the older models after it becomes deprecated, you may find that the older model is substantially more expensive than the newer one that's newer and better.
Yeah.
That's what I found in one case when I'd accidentally left something running.
Like even DaVinci 2, which I don't even know what you could
Yeah.
use that for, to be honest with you, but it's like $6 per million tokens and it's 15 cents for 4.0 mini. So 4.0 mini got announced, I think about a week ago, roughly.
Yeah.
And we switched over to that because I said, great, we have big context. And instantly we started revamping all of our prompting. We could pass so much more information into it for the same price. Actually, our costs started increasing because we found more and more people are adopting or using the AI assistant. And we were originally around $3 a day. And near just before we switched, we got up to about $10 a day. So 3x. And that happened over the period of a month or so, just through usage.
Yeah.
4.0 came out and it's 1/30th of the price of 4.0 mini came out and it's 1/30th of the price of 4.0. It's actually cheaper than 3.5 even, which was really cheap. So when we switched, that price instantly dropped. It's only a handful of days so far, but it's instantly dropped to about a tenth of the price because we actually have a blended thing. If you add pictures into the interface for 4.0 mini doesn't support images.
Yeah.
So we send it to a different model for that particular conversation that you're having, and then we go back to the cheap one. But what we're finding right now is the cheap one doesn't follow the instructions as well. It's not as good. Like they say, oh, it's a little brother or whatever. Yeah, little brothers aren't as good as big brothers, right? And that's what it seems like. And we can do side by side. We hit undo, we change the prompt, change the model, and run it again, and we definitely get better results. So it's going to take more work to dial it in for 4.0 mini, and I'm expecting it to pay off, hopefully. But I think sorry, go ahead.
Actually, I was going to ask you about that because that's something similar to what I've found. Over the last few days, I've been playing around with, I've not tried Llama 3.1 yet, but that's on my list to do. But I've been sort of comparing Llama, Gemma 2, and Phi 3 from Microsoft. And I've been finding I've get the same prompts getting quite dramatically different results from the three models. And it also seems to vary depending on what data I'm feeding in, which is interesting. So yeah, the different models do seem to respond differently to prompting. But I've been fighting to get it to give me consistent JSON back. I'm basically passing in a load of data and I want it to return JSON to me, and it'll do that perfectly, and the data is all great. The issue is that about a third of the time, it changes the name of the JSON, the keys.
Wow. Getting solid JSON back is a real challenge. What we found, this is version 3 of our AI assistant. What we found in version 1 is I used functions. So I called back a function, but we didn't have streaming, so it wasn't a big deal. And we called back a function, and the function was supposed to return JSON, and most of the time it did return good JSON, but even now and then it just didn't format it. I find that having it too much inception, it gets lost. So for example, giving an example here, and it's actually lately been doing a good job, but if I say something like, yeah, bit of luck, even this one here, there we go. So I went to demo this literally at the beginning of our meetup, and it returned different results. There's your random stuff. So here's an example of JSON, right? But here's also an example of some. There's actually every one of these is supposed to have a type key, but these ones don't. So I'm gonna have to go in and really, really tune that prompt up to say, here's some examples, and we give it.
That's actually almost exactly what I'm seeing. That sometimes it's the key is different. Everything else is great, but the key names are sometimes.
Yeah, I don't see random names, but what I do see is I'll see stuff, or I'll say change something in the label of the phone number, and it goes, this changed. It'll write some comment here like this, and that's totally wrong, right? It's totally invalid JSON. What I do find is effective is I'll take this, I'll go over to GPT, for example, say, here's the prompt, here's the stuff, this is what it returned. How come? Or even in here, I'll say, why did you do this? Or why did you do that? And I said, I also have to write, I'm debugging in there. Because for some reason it seems to relax the security on it a little bit. It can't iterate the system prompts, but it can comment on them, which is kind of interesting. Through the commenting, you can figure it out, and that helps give some light as to the direction of to what to change. I also find like these prompts are quite big now that we're sending in. We're sending 20K 20K bytes of prompting into this. And one of the things that I've also noticed is we do dynamic prompting. So depending where you are, the prompts change. We have a system, or top level, if you will, a global prompt, which tells it all about BetterForms. And then for each individual page, we are changing the context of what's going in here. So when we start to talk, it's going to grab that sub prompt for this particular page, which is the instructions on how to handle that. The bigger the prompt, I've noticed so far with Mini, is that when you have this really big prompt, you know, the expression, if everything is important, nothing's important, or something like that. It's basically, if you say, remember to do this and make sure you do that, you know, it's like your parents basically giving you crap about everything. Tie your shoes, pull up your pants, wipe your mouth, you know, change your underwear, all of these different things. I'm projecting. All of these different things. It seems to they average down, if you will. Like there's a, what do you call it, a max P or a max 1, or, you know, when you normalize something to between 0 and 1, or -1 and 1 roughly, all the prompts seem to kind of drop down, and the important stuff isn't as important anymore. So it's a real challenge. It's a whole new type of programming I've found, is to write these kinds of prompts and these interactions. The other thing, I don't know if you've experimented much with multiple. So we're using OpenAI's Assistant API, and just for background for everybody, there's your regular chat API, which is a chat completions, and it just basically provided a bunch of messages, and you say, this is from you, this is from me, and a system prompt or a top level prompt, and here are the messages, and then it just generates the next one. The Assistance API is a little bit different. It's almost the same, but it has the inclusion of records or files that you've added up, you've uploaded. So Eduardo's gone and he's wrote some code that scrapes our forum, grabs all of those and puts them into files, into chunks of files, and he's uploaded those to this Assistance API so that it can search all of those. When you first upload them, it creates embeddings for all of the files, and then you can search on that. So that's how we can get that interaction. And one of the things that we want to try next is to have effectively quality control agents. So we want to be able to take the resulting output that you get from the LLM and run that effectively into the LLM. Because I know sometimes if it produces bad JSON, I say, hey, you produced bad JSON. Oops, I'm sorry. And it goes and fixes it. So it can totally get that in the second attempt or third attempt. If, you know, first time 60% of the remaining 40%, it gets you, 85% or something. So that seems to be very promising. Although from a user experience point of view, how do you do that in an app? Do you like resend the data? You know, have you tried looking at anything like that for your case where the JSON keys are not valid?
No, I haven't, to be honest. What I did, I took the quick and dirty approach, because basically FileMaker is not talking directly to the LLM. FileMaker is talking to my API. So my API, basically, I know the JSON I want to hand back to FileMaker. So in my Python code is basically taking the JSON from the LLM and then going through it and just converting it to the format that I want. Because I know the data that it's giving me is correct. and I know which 2 or 3 different keys it's using, because it's very consistent actually in the ones that it changes around, which is, I suppose,
Right.
makes
See,
sense.
I'd code those out almost.
So yeah, so anyway, I'm handling that in Python. I'm basically,
Right.
because I Python code can look at it and say, okay, that's the one I want, grab that. And
What do you think is going to happen in the next few years then, as far as the quality of return stuff like this? I know OpenAI has mentioned numerous in their newsletters, oh, we've increased the ability for it to return JSON, but it's still not super productive or super effective. Do you think I guess we should resolve it, right?
yeah, I would expect so. The other approach that I could see would be that you could have a much smaller, very, very focused LLM that you basically handed data to, and it would give you back JSON. If it was something so tightly optimized just for creating JSON, that would
Right.
be,
So that's kind of like the secondary, like another agent, if you will,
Yeah.
or another assistant that's quality control.
actually, I wonder if some of the models that are optimized for programming might be better at that. So you're seeing a number of models that are quite highly optimized for, say, SQL queries, for example. So, I mean, OpenAI is pretty good at doing SQL queries,
Mhm.
but some of the specialized models that are custom built for generating SQL queries are like really good.
So I wonder, so we started building a tool. Oh, two things. First thing, just going back to returning quality JSON, I remember. So originally we called the function, not so good. Version 2, we said, forget about calling the function. Let's just have it escape the JSON that it returns with 3 backticks, and we'll just parse out that JSON. And that worked reasonably well. The third approach now, what we're actually doing is we very explicitly, near the end of the prompt, we say, return the data, because ours is multi-destinational, I guess you could say. So for example, if I'm in a page like this, I want to return data to here and I want to return data to here. Yeah, so using this example, so how do we get the data into these 2 different targets, right? And we want the LLM to decide when it should update this and when it should update that. So we need to give it enough description, but how do we get into the 2 different targets? So what we do is, I'm just going to sort of type over here because I can get some space, but we say basically in the prompt, return the data that goes to the model default with a code block like that. And then return the data that goes into model dev with a code block like this, right? And of course, a trailing 3. And this has actually worked reasonably well. The big challenge we've had now is it just thinks it should always return both code blocks. But if I ask it just to change something on the left side, it doesn't change it here, but it still calls that, and it doesn't need to. So it's not consistent that way. Like, I'll give you an example here. If I say convert the surveys to contacts, and hopefully this works. Right. So, okay. So this time it worked right. So you saw it go to the two different destinations. It did the first one, and what it did is it actually created an empty, let's see, contacts. What did it do? It created an empty array of contacts, which is a BetterForms sort of best practice, because this development data turns off, so it's instantiated the variable. So it's actually done a really good job here this time. But if I say remove current step, let me try that here. And you'll see it's remove current step. This kind of thing is not consistent. And this is something that if you're, let's see, yeah, see there, it did not need to update the right-hand side. So it's one of these things that it's a lot of experimentation with prompting to get it just right. So it's a lot of fiddling. And I'm hoping that over the next, investing in that over the next 6 months or the next model that comes out, it's just that much better doesn't have to know more. It just has to be able to follow instructions a little bit more, which I guess is sort of the same.
Are you using like the chat endpoints or the kind of the instructional?
This one here is using the assistant endpoint. And we were using the, I think it's chat completions, is it?
Yeah, I
For
think so.
version 2. I think that's what it's called.
Yeah.
But we wanted to, the streaming is really important because it's brutal to have to wait for that to happen if you can't see what's going on as a user. It's terrible. Even the 1.5 seconds we have to wait here is while it does a vector search is kind of slow. Like, that's kind of annoying, but this, unfortunately, there might not be an easy way around that today.
Mhm.
So anyhow, that's what I was going to say. So that's one of the ways that we've tried to get higher quality JSON. Every now and then gives a random block header. It's like, why did you do that? I don't know. It's like a kid. It's like, why? I don't know. And so that was the one thing I was gonna say to you there. Now,
Yeah.
the other one is the agencies, the multi-assistants. I think what we're going to end up doing, and Eduardo and I have been sort of visionizing this, what the final architecture is. We want to be able to basically say, hey, build me this app. And it's like, okay, what do you want in the app? We want this, we want that. Do you think this? What are your colors? What are some sites that you like? And so on. And we want to be able to do that, and it'll go scrape that site even and say, okay, I gotcha. And then build the entire app, connect all of the stuff up, and then give you a manifest of what you need to do on the back end. In order to do that, in the early tests, we've shown that we can have really good success with it structuring out how to build an app, what are the needs for the page, what kinds of information based on our user archetype and all kinds of stuff like that. So we can prompt all of that. But that prompt you can't use to generate the whole app. So we have to sort of go back and forth and give it new personas for every action that it needs to do. So there's effectively separate assistants or bots that are doing all of the sub. One's going to create the page, one's going to design the page, one's going to check the page for quality, because we can't have high enough confidence that the stuff came back properly. So
Yeah.
have you, sorry, go ahead.
Just reminded me of a screenshot I saw of somebody using OpenAI for coding, and basically saying, program me this whatever, and anyway, the response from the OpenAI was, I'll do it in the morning. And they say the comment was, it was a little bit too much training from the team's Slack channel.
That's funny. That's funny. Have you seen that? There's a neat open source thing where it's like a little office, and they even have little avatars, and basically it spins up an agent for each job role. And there's a visionary of the company, there's a quality assurance person, there's some developers, there's and there's all these things, and they basically walk around like avatars and talk to each other, and they communicate with actual
Yeah.
Each AI is communicating with through text, and you can read all the text.
I did see it, but I cannot remember where.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find. Actually, we're just gonna get caught up on some messages here. It doesn't cost a ton to prototype. I would think there would be models focused on JSON. See, for our use case, I don't have time. Like, as a team, we don't have time, and we're not big enough to have a dedicated AI department. So it's like, it takes a lot of cost to go and invest in all these different models and stuff. So I'm just hoping that, one model can rule them all and can kind of do the job. How did you get the AI to type live? Dan asked, how do you get it to type live? Dan, that's a new feature in BetterForms it's an endpoint, a streaming endpoint. And I think the preliminary doc just got added to our main docs. We have a separate addendum for the API, and you can use that right away in BF staging if you want. And if you're interested in seeing how to build that out, like how the FileMaker code works, I started building a web viewer version. And I was going to make it a quick educational video, but if you want to come to one of the workshops, we'll build it out. Yeah, Heidi just mentioned there's an LLM that generates a company and its roles. And I think that's the one we're talking about.
I think so.
Apparently it does a pretty good job. There's a couple other companies too that do full coding in the sense of like start, finish, review your code and jump back and forth and iterate upon it.
What I'm sort of worried about with stuff like that is that you're kind of creating legacy code, except just nobody understands what it does. And legacy code, when you go to a client and they've got this system that's been running for 20 years, yeah, it may be terrible, but it's been running for 20 years and it produces business value for them.
Mm-hmm.
And building some of these things like totally new. I mean, writing code for the first time isn't usually the most expensive part of running a software system. So keeping it running over time, the maintenance changes, that kind of stuff is where the costs are usually incurred.
So the fear is that we're generating code that we don't really get.
Yeah.
Mm.
Now, I think in your case, what you're doing there is because you're asking it for specific things, and you're not saying go off and. I think what I'm thinking about this was I was walking down the road one day and some guy was talking on the phone to somebody who was so excited because he said he basically had sketched out a screen, basically taken a photograph of it, and then an LLM had built this page for him. But I mean, with that, nobody would know what it's doing behind the scenes.
At least not in the future, right? Like they would know now because it's based on current technology. And if it's only trained on that stuff, that stuff will never really progress super fast. Because the body of knowledge is just not going to grow as much anymore because we're just rehashing the same code. But it makes me wonder, like, and I've mentioned this a lot of times, I still think we're all doing AI. This is just an interim step. I really do. I think there's going to be this black box AI that's not it's a binary representation versus the text representation of code, if you can sort of draw parallels there. And it just does some stuff inside the box and it does it accurately and it follows the rules. And at that point, do we care how it's doing it? Like, for example, when I first studied electronics, I had to learn about, beta curves or of gain of transistors. And I had to learn temperature coefficients of capacitors when I first had my first job. My first supervising engineer grilled me on stuff like that. And then I see all these people doing all kinds of hobby Arduino stuff, and they don't know how electronics work. Right? They have no idea that there's, this material that's doped a certain way and stuff like that. And they don't really need to at that point. So is computer programming going to be sort of like that as well, that we don't really need to know all of this stuff anymore? Which I'm okay with, by the way, because I'm kind of forgetting it at the same rate. So it might be an okay thing. I don't know.
Yeah. I don't know. Are there situations where sort of at the limits of things where you do where if you're really pushing the boundaries, where you probably do need to know some of those things? Who knows? But
it's like
I agree that it's what we're doing is we're applying AI to our current approach to solving problems.
Yeah.
And that there will probably be a better approach to solving problems that we've just aren't aware of it yet.
It's like the old FileMaker layout that looks just like the paper layout. Right?
Yeah.
It's not a new UI. It's like, oh, we're just replicated on paper. It's like, well, that's the same thing. You're not really stepping forward. Yeah, but we got it on computer now. Right? I kind of feel it's a little bit like that. I stay up at night trying to figure out where this is going to go, only so that we can stay somewhat current. That's our challenge. So it's a real, I don't know. Anyway,
Well, I mean, the stuff you've shown there is really cool. Really, really nice. Very impressive. 5 years ago, if you went back 5 years and told yourself five years ago that it was going to be capable of doing that, what would you have thought?
yeah, I remember when I first seen a first animation on a computer. Like it was in 88. We went to no, sorry, 85 to 8. Yeah, 80, about 89, 90, 1990. I went to a Motorola technology show. So they were talking about all the new chips that they were releasing and stuff. And inside this glass case, they had this phone on going around like this. It was one of those Motorola microtac phones that became popular. But at that time it was a $5,000 phone. And it's like, ooh, wow, and these are the chips that are inside it. And we're going to be talking about these chipsets to and all this stuff. And they had some CAD machine there, and they had just a cheesy animation. Honestly, I can get the AI assistant to build to build the animation in a few minutes, but I was just so blown away by that. And now I think we start to, I don't know if this is true, but I think the limits of our imagination, we start to realize that more and more is possible. Whereas in the past, it's like, I don't know if this is possible. I don't know if that's possible. But I can totally see having house robots and all these kinds of things. Like that is not a far-fetched thing. Or having your own little Watson type thing that, I mean, I got Siri here, but that's, so having some bot that follows you around and just communicates and does all of the important things, that's totally within grasp.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about everybody else? I mean, we're doing all the talking here, but please chime in. Like, what do you think? Let's predict the future right here at the Friday Live Meetup group. We'll figure it out. How's that for hubris?
Okay, so I don't think so. AI is great. I use it to code quite a bit, but at some point, it doesn't understand exactly what I want. I need to know the basic how to do JavaScript, how to do API calls, all that stuff. But I mean, the big fear that some have, I don't think it'll come to this. Is it just going to make us more and more empowered, so we're just doing a lot more, or does it, you talking about, I just tell it the app that I want and it builds it for me. At that point, are we working ourselves out of jobs? Not that that's a bad thing that happens. That's technology. Like I'm not, but what do you think about that conversation?
I don't think it's going to build the app. I think it's going to be the app. I think you're going to have one app that rules them all. And it's just an app. It's like, this is how you use a computer. For example, I switched from PC to Mac in 2011, and I used to be spending a good chunk of my time, and I'm not knocking PCs because they've come a long way. But back then, I'd be dicking around with sound cards, and I got my video card, and video card's in the wrong slot. It's causing a compatibility issue, and I'd be downloading these DLLs and trying to mix and match ones to get crap to work. And I'd have to be in that area, right? And even before that, I knew DOS, right? DOS 5.0 was, I think, the first version that I really kind of was somewhat, I could copy files and do stuff. Not a freaking clue these days. I don't need to know any of that, right? I don't even really on my Mac, my machine, I install software, but I click on it and I think sometimes I drag it over. That is literally the limit of my knowledge on how it works. So we've gone up a level. And I think the app building it for you is still kind of just taking the parts and putting everything together. I think it's more going to be some kind of a black box. Imagine you had a software program and you say, hey, I need this, this, and this. There it is on the screen. Oh, can you make it do this next time? There it is. Put a header pitch. You just tell the changes and it does it. And that is the app and you save it. You don't think about it building it. It's just doing it somehow. And you have no real idea what's happening underneath. and then they take over. That's my theory. I don't know. I don't think they're going to take over just yet, but I mean, the building of the app.
So I mean, at that point though, like BetterForms FileMaker, like this is all just, which is fine. We've evolved, like you said, you've evolved for your entire life, and you just continue to evolve, I guess. And just whatever's next
It'll be
comes.
better. It'll be BetterForms Skynet edition.
Yeah. We are trying to evolve with that. We want to be able to say, hey, create this app, and it just does that stuff. Right? Here's the thing. Here's how this is. I've mentioned this before, but I'll go on the line and record it today and say, this is what I think. Here's how we build apps, right? We go through places, we do stuff, we add things, we add bits and pieces and stuff. And it's like, why am I editing the app here? All right. Let me just do something, give you an example here. Let's find this. I don't know what this is, but why am I editing the app here? Why do I even have this tab open? Why don't I just do it from here and say, can you add an edit? Can you add a header here? Boom, great. And it does it. Can you connect and can you go and see what data? Can you connect this to my data? Okay, what data do you have? I see that you have these tables. Oh, that table. Right? Why am I in that editor in the first place? Why am I over here doing stuff? Because we can't do it here. So this is where I can see us moving into that direction where we don't interact with that editor unless we need some really complex thing that the current state of whatever it is AI can't do. But wouldn't that be nice just to interact? And maybe you would do it through here. And maybe there'd be a microphone icon and it would really just talk to this stuff in behind the scenes, so it's all actually doable today. That particular concept, that black box feel, but it's not truly black box. It's just wrapper.
Right.
And as you've talked about before, it's unreliable.
Right. At some level still. The other thing is like at some level, AI is never looking forward. It's always looking backwards. So there's something creative there that it has to lack because right?
What do you mean by that?
I can only look at what's been and work on that based on that. It can't actually see something that hasn't been yet.
It can be pretty creative though. Have you seen some of the
Yeah.
song generation
Not
stuff?
any good ones, so maybe I haven't looked. I mean, not much.
Quite good. Like you can say, hey, write a hit that does this, and it's like really good. I was in a meetup from not a meetup, but it was a conference, like an online conference on AI, but it was for AI for executives, and they demonstrated this. And I was like, holy cow. Like even the lyrics were phenomenal. Like
Yeah.
I could write something like that. And that was creative. I mean, it's based on other stuff. You know, even the artwork is pretty decent. Even that's today's level. I'm just going back to what Dan was saying. Dan, yeah, the unreliable part, I think we can solve that. I think that's going to be solved. And you can solve it today with having AI check its quality of output. It's just not a great user experience because you got to do it twice.
But I've hammered away at it. No. I want you to do this. And it doesn't. Wait, I just told you to do this. And then it doesn't again. I mean, there are times where you can just bang your head against a wall and tell it.
And it doesn't get
exactly what you
frustrated. It
want.
just keeps telling you the same thing over and over again.
Yeah.
Is that like in GPT where you have a huge thread of stuff? And because I do find if that's the case, you do get lost in that. You got to prune your thread tree so it doesn't have the random context. Like I find if you tell your AI, you say, you know, you're here and you want to go to here, right? And you say the AI does this, and you say, okay, do this, and then it goes like this. And you say, do this, then it goes over to here. And then it's like, okay, you're lost, right? It's not really getting me close. What you do is take the correction that it added here, here, and here, and then you go back to your first prompt, and then you add those extra corrections, and then you're more online. Like just techniques like that, like using chat, that makes a huge difference. Keep rebuilding your initial prompt instead of having it redial because it's generating based on all of that information, and it has to take those negatives with the positives into its next token that it's generating.
I just get lazy and never start new conversations and just pile on and pile on, and so that's actually good advice. I should do that when I find myself just struggling with it. Is to totally break, start a whole new chat. That makes
Yeah.
That's
The
probably
minute
the
it goes
right
sideways, come back again, and then keep working that way. You'll find way better results that way.
it is still a game though, right? This isn't just plug and play. And what Bradley was saying is you have to understand what you're asking it to do and give it super specific prompts. And even then, it doesn't give you what you want, and you have to know exactly what you want to be able to get it to give you what you want. I understand this is an intermediary step, but it's certainly what I've found to be the state of play.
What is the guy who works for NVIDIA? Last name is Ing. Jason Ing? Jason NVIDIA. NVIDIA. He has a talk. I think it's him. I'm just seeing if I can find him. Jensen Huang? No, that's not it. Jason Ing. Anyway, there's a guy, I think he's the CEO or he's somebody somewhere up there with NVIDIA, and he gave a talk on some tests that he's done by using multiple assistants or bots. Basically, he takes, even if it's the same model, he takes the data that comes out and then uses that as a prompt or feeds that in again and says, correct this, and look for mistakes, that kind of thing. And we see the same thing. Even if you're using the AI system, when we release that and it's got a mistake, say, hey, I think there's a mistake, and tell it what it is, and there's a good chance it'll fix it in that next run. Because it's not generating this thing from total scratch now. It's like it's got, it's transforming this what it's got is, and it's looking at all of these prompts to get that next one, and it just seems to do a better job at that. Well, I want to, we can keep hanging out here, but I do want to just quickly do our switch to, I'm just going to share my screen real quick, and I want to switch to our quick draw here. We usually have a draw every week. And here is our click to spin. The rules are you have to be here to win. And just a sec, share computer audio, mono. There you go. And yeah, that's it. Is John here? I don't think I recognize the name, but going once, twice. All right. John is gone. Hey, Jason finally wins. All right.
Hi. Wow. So exciting.
There you go. Finally,
I
Jason
won
comes out
once.
every time. I'm not gonna lie. I popped his name in here a couple extra times because he comes out all the time. So I didn't know if anybody had noticed, but full and fair disclosure, I didn't really cheat. I just weighted it a little bit different, right? But oops, sorry. But
I do remember seeing that I won once, the one time I didn't come.
yeah.
But other than that, that's my first time. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll just send a direct message to Madalena or vice versa, and we'll get you hooked up. I'm going to stop our recording here, but thank you everybody for coming out, and we'll see you next month.